I never thought I'd feel a mix of satisfaction and guilt watching my parents move their belongings into my guest house. The same parents who, 7 years earlier, had handed me a rental agreement while my sister Amanda lounged by the pool, never once asked to contribute a dime to the household. Life has a strange way of revealing the true worth of family bonds when circumstances shift. My name is Jessica Winters, and I'm now the owner of a sprawling California property with a main house and guest house that my parents desperately need to occupy. But before we get into that, let me take you back to where this all began, to understand how the daughter who was treated like a tenant ended up becoming her parents' landlord. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. It was a sweltering August afternoon when everything changed. I had just graduated with my master's degree in architectural design and returned to my parents' home in Oak Ridge, California. At 24, I was eager to start my career, but the reality of student loan debt and the competitive job market meant moving back home temporarily was my best financial option. I remember sitting at the kitchen island, laptop open, scrolling through job listings when my father, Richard Winters, placed a folded document beside my computer. My mother, Caroline, stood behind him, arms crossed and expression unreadable. "What's this?" I asked, picking up what appeared to be a formal document. "A rental agreement," Dad said matter-of-factly. "You're an adult now, Jessica. If you're going to live here, you need to contribute." I stared at them, stunned. The rental agreement specified $800 per month, plus 1/3 of the utilities and a security deposit of $200. My hands trembled slightly as I read through the terms. "Is this a joke?" I asked, looking between them. Mom sighed. "We've discussed this, honey. You have a master's degree now. It's time you learned financial responsibility." What they conveniently failed to mention was that my younger sister, Amanda, only 2 years my junior, had been living at home rent-free since she dropped out of college 3 years earlier. Currently, she worked part-time at a local boutique, spent most of her earnings on clothes and weekend getaways, and had never once been asked to contribute to household expenses. "And Amanda?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Will she be signing a rental agreement too?" Dad and Mom exchanged glances. "Amanda's situation is different," Dad said. "She's still finding her path." "And I'm not?" I countered. "I just finished my education. I have over $80,000 in student loans. I'm actively looking for work in my field." "That's exactly it," Mom interjected. "You have an education, Jessica. You have potential. Amanda needs more support right now." The double standard was breathtaking. Throughout our childhood, I had always been the responsible one, the daughter who got straight A's, who didn't cause trouble, who babysat Amanda when my parents needed a night out. Now, that responsibility was being weaponized against me. Wanted to argue, to point out the blatant unfairness. But something in their expressions told me it would be useless. This decision had been made long before they placed that document in front of me. "When do you need the security deposit?" I asked, my voice hollow. "By the end of the week would be good," Dad replied, seeming relieved I wasn't putting up more of a fight. "And the first month's rent is due on the 1st. I nodded, turned back to my laptop, and continued my job search with renewed desperation. Behind me, I heard my parents leave the kitchen, their mission accomplished. Through the window, I could see Amanda lounging by the pool, phone in hand, without a care in the world. That night, I barely slept. My childhood bedroom suddenly felt foreign, like a space I was borrowing rather than a place that belonged to me. The walls, still adorned with my high school achievement certificates and college acceptance letters, now seemed to mock me. All those accomplishments, and here I was, being charged rent while my sister lived entirely expense-free under the same roof. The next morning, Amanda sauntered into the kitchen as I was making coffee, her hair still tousled from sleep. It was nearly 11 a.m. and she had nowhere to be until her 4 p.m. shift at the boutique. "Morning," she yawned, reaching for a mug. What got you up so early? Job hunting, I replied tersely. And figuring out how I'm going to come up with a security deposit by Friday. She paused, cup midway to the coffee pot. Security deposit? For what? I studied her face, realizing she genuinely had no idea. Mom and Dad are charging me rent to live here. $800 a month plus utilities. Amanda's eyes widened. Seriously? That's kind of steep, isn't it? Are they charging you rent? I asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head. No. They've never mentioned anything like that to me. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of discomfort cross her face, a brief recognition of the inequity, but it vanished quickly, replaced by her usual carefree expression. Well, you did just get your master's, she offered, as if that explained everything. They probably figure you can afford it. With what job, Amanda? The one I don't have yet because I just graduated? Or should I use the money I don't have because of my student loans? She shrugged, uncomfortable with my directness. I'm sure they just want to help you be independent. You've always been the smart one, the capable one. And there it was, the familiar narrative. Jessica, the capable one. Jessica, who doesn't need help. Jessica, who can handle anything. A lifetime of meeting expectations had somehow transformed into a justification for treating me differently, for making me pay for the privilege of being considered competent. I drained my coffee cup and stood up. I need to go to the bank. Then I'm meeting with a recruiter downtown. As I gathered my things, I noticed Amanda watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it guilt, pity, or simply relief that she wasn't in my position? Jess, she said as I reached the door, maybe I could loan you some money for the deposit if you need it. The offer, however well-intentioned, stung worse than the rental agreement. My younger sister, who had never held a full-time job, who spent frivolously and lived consequence-free, was offering to loan me money to pay our parents for the right to sleep in my childhood bedroom. I'll manage, I said, and closed the door behind me. I spent that day moving between banks, recruiters, and potential employers, a growing determination fueling each step. If my parents wanted to treat me like a tenant rather than a daughter, then I would need to find a way to become financially independent as quickly as possible. I would need to transform this setback into an opportunity, though I had no idea then just how dramatically the situation would eventually shift in my favor. The security deposit wiped out most of my modest savings. I'd managed to build a small cushion from my graduate assistantship, but after writing that check to my father, my bank account looked dangerously thin. I had exactly 3 weeks to find employment before the first month's rent came due. I applied to every architectural firm in a 50-mile radius. I created portfolios tailored to each company's style and philosophy. I networked at industry events, reached out to former professors for references, and even applied to adjacent positions. Drafting, interior design, project management, anything that might provide income while I continued searching for my dream job. Meanwhile, life at home took on a surreal quality. My parents maintained their usual warmth with Amanda, movie nights, cooking her favorite meals, casual conversations about her day at the boutique, while our interactions became increasingly transactional. Dad would remind me about the upcoming utility payment. Mom would ask if I needed a receipt for my rent check. I was still their daughter, but now I was also a tenant, and the distinction colored every interaction. 2 weeks into my job search, I received an offer from Meridian Design Group, a mid-sized firm specializing in sustainable commercial architecture. The salary was lower than I'd hoped, $52,000 a year, but it was a foot in the door, and I accepted immediately. That evening, I shared the news with my family over dinner. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, genuinely pleased. "When do you start?" "Monday," I replied, cutting into my chicken. It's entry-level, but they have a strong mentorship program. Well, now you'll have no trouble with the rent, Dad commented, reaching for the salad. And you can start building your savings again. Amanda, who had been scrolling through her phone between bites, looked up. What's the commute like? About 45 minutes each way, I said. I might need to look for a place closer to the office eventually. Don't be hasty, Dad said quickly. Rent around here is astronomical for a one-bedroom. You're getting a good deal staying at home. A good deal? $800 plus utilities for a bedroom in my parents' house, the same bedroom I'd had since childhood, while, my sister lived completely expense-free. I met his gaze across the table. Am I? I asked quietly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Amanda shifted in her seat, suddenly very interested in her plate. Mom cleared her throat. We only want what's best for you, Jessica, she said. This arrangement teaches you financial responsibility. And what is it teaching Amanda? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Dad's expression hardened. We're not discussing this again. Your sister's situation is different. How? I pressed. She's 22. She works part-time by choice. She has no student loans because she dropped out. Please explain to me how her situation justifies free housing while I pay nearly $1,000 a month. That's enough, Dad said, his tone final. This is our house, and these are our rules. I looked at my mother, hoping to find some support, but she avoided my eyes. Amanda stared at her plate, uncomfortable but silent. You're right, I said finally, folding my napkin. It is your house. Thank you for dinner. I excused myself and retreated to my room, my rented room, and began calculating. My expenses. After taxes, my new salary would bring home about $3,300 monthly. Rent and utilities would consume nearly a third of that. Add student loan payments, car insurance, gas for the commute, professional clothing, and basic necessities, and I'd be left with precious little to save. Living at home was supposed to give me a financial advantage, a chance to build savings and eventually put a down payment on my own place. Instead, I was paying premium prices for a bedroom and the growing resentment of being treated differently than my sister. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The next morning, I left early for a pre-employment orientation at Meridian. As I backed out of the driveway, I noticed Amanda standing in the kitchen window, watching me. For a moment, our eyes met, and I thought I saw something like guilt in her expression. But then she turned away, and I drove off to begin my professional life. My first few weeks at Meridian were exhilarating and exhausting. The learning curve was steep, the hours long, but I threw myself into the work with determination. My direct supervisor, Elaine Foster, was a brilliant architect in her 40s who didn't sugarcoat feedback but recognized genuine effort. Under her guidance, I began to find my footing in the firm. You've got good instincts, Winters, she told me after I'd successfully resolved a complex issue with a client's floor plan. Raw, but good. Coming from Elaine, this was high praise. I worked harder, stayed later, volunteered for challenging projects. Every hour at the office was an hour I didn't have to spend in my rented bedroom. Every challenge met was proof that I could overcome the situation at home. One evening, about 2 months into my job, I returned home to find a note on my bedroom door. Rent increased to $900 a month starting next month. Rising property taxes. Dad. No discussion, no warning, just $100 increase, effective immediately. I stood in the hallway, note in hand, as anger and disbelief washed over me. From Amanda's room, I could hear her laughing on a phone call, discussing plans for a weekend trip to San Diego with friends. Down the hall, the TV murmured from my parents' bedroom. This house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a trap designed to extract maximum value from me while giving nothing back. That night, I created a spreadsheet detailing every penny I'd paid. my parents since moving back home. The total was already approaching $3,000, not including utilities. By contrast, Amanda had contributed exactly $0 while enjoying the same roof, the same utilities, the same family meals. The next day, I stayed late at work, using Meridian's resources to research rental properties near the office. The options were grim: studios and one-bedrooms starting at $1,500, well beyond what I could comfortably afford. Moving out would mean financial hardship, but staying was becoming emotionally untenable. As I drove home that evening, I passed a for rent sign outside a small garage apartment a few miles from Meridian. On impulse, I pulled over and called the number listed. The landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patel, agreed to show me the space immediately. The apartment was tiny, 400 square feet, with a kitchenette, bathroom, and a main room that would serve as both bedroom and living area. The rent was $100, utilities included. It would be a stretch financially, but as Mrs. Patel showed me around, a sense of possibility began to take root. "It's perfect for a young professional," she said warmly. "My husband built it for our son when he was starting out." I calculated quickly in my head. Moving here would consume over a third of my take-home pay, leaving even less for savings than I had now, but it would be mine. No notes on the door announcing rent increases. No watching my sister float through life expense-free while I shouldered burdens alone. "I'll take it," I said, surprising myself with the decisiveness. "When can I move in?" As I signed the lease agreement, the second one I'd signed in 3 months, I felt a strange mix of trepidation and liberation. This tiny apartment represented both a financial setback and an emotional step forward. I had no idea then how this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately transform not just my living situation, but the entire dynamic of my family. I didn't tell my parents about the apartment right away. Instead, I quietly began preparations, purchasing essential furniture from thrift stores and Facebook Marketplace, setting up utilities in my name, and packing my belongings in small batches to avoid raising suspicion. 2 weeks before my move-in date, I finally broke the news over Sunday breakfast. "I've found my own place," I announced, spreading jam on my toast with deliberate calm. "I'll be moving out at the end of the month." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad lowered his newspaper slowly, expression unreadable. Mom's coffee cup hovered midway to her lips. Amanda, surprisingly, was the first to react. "You're moving out? Where to?" She seemed genuinely shocked, as if the possibility had never occurred to her. "A small apartment near work," I replied. "It'll cut my commute significantly." Dad cleared his throat. "This is rather sudden, Jessica. Is this about the rent increase? Because we can discuss." "It's not about the money," I interrupted, though, of course, it partly was. "It's about independence. I'm 24 with a full-time job. It's time." "But you've only been working for a few months," Mom protested. "Wouldn't it make more sense to build your savings a bit longer?" The irony wasn't lost on me. After months of treating me like a tenant, they were now arguing that I should stay, continue paying them rent, rather than establish my own household. "My decision is made," I said firmly. "I've signed a lease." Dad's expression darkened. "That was premature. You should have discussed this with us first." "Why?" I asked simply. "Amanda doesn't discuss her financial decisions with you. Why should I?" The comparison hung in the air, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Mom glanced anxiously between us, while Amanda studied her plate with sudden intensity. "This isn't about your sister," Dad said, his voice tight. "No, it never is," I agreed. "And that's exactly why I'm leaving." I stood up, appetite gone. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, but it's time I lived on my own terms." The remaining 2 weeks at my parents' house were tense. Dad was coldly polite, clearly disapproving of my decision, but unwilling to engage further. Mom fluctuated between concern about my finances and hurt that I was leaving so abruptly. Amanda seemed confused by the whole situation, as if only now realizing the disparity in how we'd been treated. The day before my move, she appeared in my doorway as I packed the last of my belongings. "Need any help?" she offered tentatively. I looked up, surprised. "Sure. You can box up those books." We worked in silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. "I didn't know they were charging you so much," she said quietly. "Not until recently." "Would it have mattered if you did?" I asked, not unkindly. She considered this, folding a sweater with unusual care. "I don't know. I never thought about it much. You've always been so together, so capable." "Being capable doesn't mean I don't need support," I said. "It doesn't mean I should have to pay for the privilege of being part of this family when you don't." Amanda looked stricken. "Is that how you see it?" "How else should I see it?" I placed the last of my clothes in a suitcase and zipped it shut. "We're both adults. We're both their children. But only one of us is charged rent." "I've offered to pay," she admitted, surprising me. "After I found out about your rent going up. Dad said I didn't need to, that my job at the boutique barely covers my own expenses." This new information shifted something in my perception, though it didn't change my decision. Amanda wasn't the architect of the inequality. Our parents were. "It's not your fault," I said finally, "but I need to do this for myself." She nodded, understanding in her eyes for perhaps the first time. The next day, with my car and a small rented truck packed to capacity, I said goodbye to my childhood home. The farewell was awkward, Mom teary, Dad stoic, Amanda hovering uncertainty in the background. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, anxiety, sadness, and a burgeoning sense of freedom. My new apartment was exactly as small as I remembered. After unloading my belongings, I stood in the center of the space, taking it all in. The secondhand furniture, the tiny kitchenette, the single window overlooking Mrs. Patel's garden. It wasn't much, but it was mine, paid for with my own money, governed by my own rules. That first night was strange. The unfamiliar sounds of the building, the absence of family moving around nearby, the complete privacy. It was both liberating and disorienting. I sat cross-legged on my new, used futon, eating takeout and scrolling, through rental listings out of habit, before realizing I no longer needed to search. I had a home now, humble as it was. The financial reality of independence hit hard that first month. After rent, utilities, groceries, student loan payments, and other essentials, my bank account was nearly empty. I started bringing lunch to work. Instead of buying it, canceled streaming subscriptions, and learned to stretch a grocery budget further than I'd thought possible. Elaine noticed the change in my habits, the packed lunches, the declined happy hour invitations, and called me into her office one afternoon. "Everything okay, Winters?" she asked, direct as always. "You seem to be pinching pennies lately." I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I recently moved into my own place. It's a bit of a financial adjustment." She nodded thoughtfully. "Been there. First year on your own is always lean." She tapped her pen against her desk. "The Peterson project is entering phase 2 next month. I need someone to take point on the sustainability elements. It comes with a stipend. Interested?" The opportunity was exactly what I needed: additional income and valuable experience. "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "Good. It'll mean longer hours, weekend work sometimes. Think you can handle it?" "I can," I assured her, grateful beyond words. As I left her office, I realized that Elaine had offered me something my parents never had: recognition of my ability coupled with tangible support, not used as a justification for treating me differently than others. The Peterson project became my lifeline. The extra income helped ease my financial strain, while the additional responsibility accelerated my professional development. I threw myself into the work, staying late at the office, bringing drawings home to my tiny apartment, researching sustainable building materials during weekends. My parents called occasionally, conversation stiff and surface level. How was work? How was the apartment? Did I need anything? This last question always felt loaded, as if they were waiting for me to admit I couldn't manage on my own. Amanda visited once, bringing a houseplant as a warming gift. She seemed genuinely impressed by how I'd transformed the small space. "It's cozy," she said, running her hand along my secondhand bookshelf. "You've made it really nice." "It's not much," I admitted, "but it's a start." She hesitated, then added, "Mom and Dad miss you, you know, even if they don't say it." I nodded non-committally. I missed aspects of home too. Sunday breakfasts, the familiar comfort of my childhood bedroom, the sense of belonging to something larger than myself. But I didn't miss the inequality, the constant reminder that I was valued differently than my sister. "How are things at home?" I asked, changing the subject. Amanda looked away. "Different. Quieter." She paused. "Dad's been talking about having me pay a small contribution toward household expenses. Nothing like what you were paying, but still." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Only after I'd left, only after I'd refused to continue accepting unfair treatment, had our parents begun to reconsider their approach with Amanda. As she was leaving, Amanda turned back, expression serious. "I'm sorry, Jess. I should have seen it sooner how unfair it was." Her apology, unexpected and sincere, healed something small but significant between us. The rift wasn't with my sister, I realized, but with the parents who had created the disparity between us. That night, alone in my apartment, I made a promise to myself. I would build something from this beginning. Something solid. Something lasting. Something entirely my own. I had no idea then how literal that promise would become, or how dramatically the tables would turn in the years ahead. 6 months flew by in my tiny apartment. The Peterson project had been a success, earning me not just additional income but recognition within the firm. Elaine had begun entrusting me with more responsibility, and clients were starting to ask for me by name, small victories that built my confidence and professional reputation. Financially, things remained tight but manageable. I'd created a strict budget and adhered to it religiously, allowing me to build a modest emergency fund. My student loan balance was slowly decreasing, and I no longer broke into a cold sweat when unexpected expenses arose. Then came the day that changed everything. I was reviewing blueprints in the conference room when Elaine appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s. "Winters, this is Edward Bennett," she said, "CEO of Phoenix Developments. He's looking for someone to head up the sustainability design for his new eco-resort project." I stood quickly, extending my hand. "Jessica Winters, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Bennett." "Edward, please," he said, his handshake firm. "Elaine tells me you're the person I need to talk to about incorporating cutting-edge sustainable elements without sacrificing luxury aesthetics." Elaine nodded toward the blueprints, spread across the table. "Show him what you've been working on for the Peterson building." For the next hour, I walked Edward through my designs, explaining the passive cooling systems, the water reclamation features, the solar integration that blended seamlessly with the building's contemporary lines. He asked sharp, insightful questions that revealed his deep knowledge of both sustainability principles and luxury market demands. When we finished, he sat back, expression thoughtful. "Impressive work, especially for someone early in their career. How long have you been with Meridian?" "Just over 8 months," I admitted. He raised an eyebrow. 8 months? And they've got you leading sustainability on major projects already?" "Jessica has a natural talent for balancing innovation with practicality," Elaine interjected. "She's advanced more quickly than any junior associate I've mentored." Edward nodded slowly. I can see why. He turned to me. My eco-resort project is located on 50 acres in Sonoma County. We're creating a luxury retreat with minimal environmental impact, a showcase property that will hopefully become a model for sustainable hospitality. I need someone who understands both the technical aspects and the high-end aesthetic we're aiming for. My pulse quickened. This sounded like a career-defining opportunity. I'd like you to come up to the site next weekend, he continued. See the property, discuss the vision in more detail. Assuming Meridian can spare you, he added, glancing at Elaine. She smiled. We have an excellent collaborative relationship with Phoenix Developments. I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone. After Edward left, Elaine explained the arrangement. Phoenix was looking to contract directly with a sustainability architect, but wanted to maintain their relationship with Meridian for other aspects of the project. If I took the job, I'd be working as an independent consultant while still retaining my position at Meridian for other projects. It's unusual, she admitted, but Edward specifically asked for you after seeing your portfolio. This could be huge for your career, Winters. And the compensation? She named a figure that made my eyes widen. That's just the consulting fee. There would be performance bonuses, too. The amount was more than 3 times my current salary. Enough to transform my financial situation completely. That weekend, I drove to Sonoma County, nervous but excited. The property was breathtaking. Rolling hills dotted with oak trees, a natural spring feeding into a small lake, vineyards bordering one side. Edward walked me through his vision. 20 luxury cabins nestled into the landscape, a main lodge with farm-to-table restaurant, wellness facilities integrated with the natural environment. The challenge, he explained as we stood on a ridge, overlooking the property, is creating an experience that feels indulgent without compromising our commitment to sustainability. Most eco-resorts sacrifice luxury for environmental principles, or vice versa. I want both. By the end of the day, I was buzzing with ideas. Edward seemed equally enthusiastic about my preliminary thoughts. I have a good feeling about this partnership, he said as we concluded the tour. Send me a formal proposal by the end of next week. If it's as promising as I expect, we'll draw up contracts immediately. I worked on the proposal every evening after my regular Meridian hours, often staying up until 2 or 3 a.m. The vision consumed me, a chance to create something truly groundbreaking, to put my name on a project that could redefine eco-luxury hospitality. When I finally submitted the proposal, Edward responded within hours. This exceeds all expectations. Let's move forward immediately. My lawyers will send contracts tomorrow. The following week was a whirlwind of negotiations, contract reviews, and planning. Elaine helped me navigate the complexities of establishing myself as an independent consultant while maintaining my role at Meridian. By Friday, everything was finalized. I would be the lead sustainability architect for Phoenix's eco-resort, with a contract that guaranteed substantial income for at least the next 2 years. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the signed contracts spread across my futon. For the first time since graduation, I felt financially secure, more than secure, actually. The Phoenix contract alone would generate enough income for me to consider buying property instead of renting, to accelerate my student loan payments, to build real wealth rather than just scraping by. I called Amanda to share the news, our relationship having gradually improved since my move. "That's incredible, Jess," she exclaimed after I explained the opportunity. "We should celebrate. Dinner tomorrow night? My treat." We met at a nice restaurant downtown, nicer than I would have normally chosen given my budget, but fitting for the occasion. Amanda arrived with a small gift bag. "What's this?" I asked as she pushed it across the table. "Just a little congratulations present." "Open it." Inside was a beautiful leather portfolio case with my initials embossed in the corner. "For your big important meetings with rich clients," she said with a grin. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's perfect." Over dinner, Amanda updated me on family news. She had recently been promoted to assistant manager at the boutique and had started taking business classes at the community college. "I'm trying to be more like my big sister," she admitted. "More focused, more driven." "And how are Mom and Dad?" I asked cautiously. Our relationship had remained cordial but distant since my move. Amanda hesitated. "They're adjusting. Dad's company is going through some changes. Restructuring, he calls it. And Mom's been talking about going back to work part-time." She fidgeted with her napkin. "They've started having me contribute to groceries and utilities. Nothing major, but still." I nodded, processing this information. It seemed my departure had indeed triggered some recalibration in the family dynamic. "Have you told them about the Phoenix Project?" she asked. "Not yet," I admitted. I wasn't sure they'd be interested. "They would be," Amanda insisted. "Despite everything, they're proud of you, Jess. They just have a weird way of showing it." I wasn't so sure, but I promised to call them with the news. When I did the next day, their reaction was mixed. Enthusiasm about the professional opportunity, tempered with concern about the unconventional arrangement. "It sounds risky," Dad cautioned. "Consulting isn't as stable as a regular position." "The contract guarantees minimum compensation well above my current salary," I explained patiently. "And it keeps the door open for continued work with Meridian." "Well, you've always known what you're doing," Mom said, in what I supposed was meant to be a compliment, but landed as another reminder of their hands-off approach to my success, so. I hung up. I realized something important. Their approval no longer mattered the way it once had. I had built this opportunity myself, through my own talent and hard work. The validation I needed now came from within, and occasionally from mentors like Elaine, who supported my growth while recognizing my contributions. The Phoenix Project was about to change my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine, opening doors I'd never dreamed possible, and ultimately reshaping my relationship with my family in the most unexpected ways. The first 6 months of the Phoenix Project transformed both my professional standing and my financial reality. Edward proved to be not just a visionary client, but a valuable mentor, introducing me to his extensive network of developers, investors, and industry leaders. My innovative, sustainable designs for the eco-resort garnered attention in architectural publications, and I began receiving inquiries about similar projects. Meanwhile, the consulting fees allowed me to make significant changes in my personal life. I paid off the remaining balance on my student loans, a moment of profound relief after years of monthly payments hanging over my head. I upgraded from my tiny garage apartment to a comfortable one-bedroom in a modern building closer to downtown. I started building a substantial investment portfolio, following advice from a financial advisor Edward had recommended. My relationship with Meridian evolved as well. Elaine restructured my position to accommodate my consulting work, reducing my in-office hours while keeping me involved in key projects. The arrangement benefited everyone, Meridian maintained their connection to the high-profile Phoenix development, while I gained the flexibility to pursue additional consulting opportunities. "You're becoming quite the entrepreneurial architect," Elaine remarked one afternoon as we reviewed my reduced Meridian schedule. "I wouldn't be surprised if you start your own firm within a few years." The idea had already been forming in the back of my mind, but hearing Elaine voice it made it seem more tangible. "Would that disappoint you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her reaction. She smiled. "Not at all. The best mentors create colleagues, not perpetual subordinates. Besides," she added with a wink, "I'd expect preferential collaboration rates if you do branch out on your own." As my professional life flourished, my interactions with my family settled into a new pattern. Amanda and I had dinner together every couple of weeks, our relationship stronger now that we were both establishing independent adult lives. She had moved into a shared apartment with 2 friends from her business classes and was taking her career more seriously, having enrolled in a full merchandising program at the local college. My parents remained more distant. We spoke on holidays and birthdays, exchanged occasional text messages, but rarely discussed anything substantive. They seemed unsure how to relate to my success, how to bridge the gap that had formed when I left their home. Then came the call that signaled another shift in our family dynamic. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was reviewing sustainability certifications for the Phoenix project when my phone lit up with Dad's number. Unusual, since he typically called on weekends, if at all. "Dad," I answered, setting aside my work. "Everything okay?" There was a pause before he spoke. "Jessica, yes, everything's—" Another pause. "Actually, no, things aren't exactly okay." The hesitation in his voice, so uncharacteristic of my decisive father, immediately put me on alert. "What's wrong? Is it Mom? Amanda?" No, everyone's healthy," he assured me quickly. It's work. The company's downsizing. After 26 years, they're eliminating my entire department." I sat back, processing this news. My father had been with Westbrook Manufacturing since before I was born, working his way up from the production floor to operations management. The company had been the bedrock of our family's financial stability throughout my childhood. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "What are they offering for severance?" 3 months' salary, he replied, and continuation of benefits for that period. "It's not terrible, but not enough to maintain your lifestyle long-term," I finished for him. "Exactly." He sighed heavily. "At my age, finding a comparable position won't be easy. The industry has changed significantly. Many of my skills are considered outdated now." "What about your retirement accounts?" I asked, trying to assess the full picture. Another uncomfortable pause. "We've had to draw from those more than we planned over the past few years. The house needed a new roof, and then there were some investments that didn't pan out as expected." The subtext was clear. Their financial situation was precarious. After years of comfortable stability that had somehow never extended to reducing my rent or helping with my student loans, they were facing uncertainty. "I see," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What's your plan?" "That's partly why I'm calling," he admitted. "Your mother and I are considering downsizing, selling the house, finding something smaller and more affordable. We wanted to get your thoughts, given your experience in real estate design." The request for advice was unprecedented. My father had never consulted me on financial or property matters before, having always positioned himself as the authority on such things. "Downsizing makes sense if you're facing reduced income," I said carefully. "The housing market in Oak Ridge is strong right now. You should be able to sell quickly and for a good price. As for where to move..." I paused, considering the options. "What's your timeline?" "The layoff takes effect in 30 days, he replied. "We'd like to list the house as soon as possible after that." "Let me think about it and get back to you," I offered. "I know several real estate agents through my work who specialize in the area. I can check if any of them have insights on good retirement-friendly communities." "Thank you, Jessica," he said, relief evident in his voice. "We appreciate any help you can provide." After we hung up, I sat motionless, absorbing the implications of this conversation. My parents, who had charged me premium rent while allowing my sister to live free, were now turning to me for assistance navigating their financial uncertainty. The irony wasn't lost on me. I called Amanda the next day to see if she was aware of the situation. "Dad told me yesterday," she confirmed. "It's pretty bad, Jess. They've been struggling financially for a while now, but they kept it quiet. That's part of why they started asking me to contribute. Their savings were dwindling faster than they let on." "Why didn't they say anything?" I wondered aloud. "Pride, I think," Amanda replied. "Especially Dad's. He's always seen himself as the provider, the financial authority. Admitting he's in trouble, it's difficult for him." I understood this perspective, even as it frustrated me. How different might our relationship have been if they'd approached my return home, not as an opportunity to collect rent from their daughter, but as a mutual support system during transitional phases of life. That evening, as I looked around my new apartment, comfortable, stylish, paid for with income from my own expanding business, a thought began to form. The Phoenix project was nearing completion, but Edward had already approached me about designing his next development, a small community of luxury homes with extensive eco-friendly features located just outside Sonoma. Part of the proposed compensation package included an option to purchase one of the properties at a significant discount. I had been considering it as an investment opportunity, but now a different possibility emerged. The next morning, I called Edward to discuss modifying one of the home designs to include a separate guest house, a self-contained space that would offer privacy while remaining accessible to the main residents. "Thinking of having a family stay over?" he asked, immediately approving the design change. "Something like that," I replied, already envisioning the conversation I would eventually have with my parents. How strange life could be, I thought as I reviewed the preliminary drawings. The daughter who had once been charged rent for her childhood bedroom was now contemplating becoming her parents' landlord, or rather their benefactor. The prospect filled me with complicated emotions. Satisfaction? Yes, but also a measure of compassion I hadn't expected to feel. Over the next 2 months, my parents' situation deteriorated faster than expected. Dad's severance package barely covered their existing expenses, and their efforts to sell the house stalled when a home inspection revealed significant foundation issues they hadn't been aware of. Problems that would require costly repairs before any sale could proceed. Kept tabs on the situation through Amanda, who visited them regularly. "They're burning through their savings," she reported during one of our dinner meetups. "And Dad's job search isn't going well. He's had a few interviews, but nothing's panned out. They're starting to get desperate." Meanwhile, my own career continued its meteoric rise. The Phoenix Eco Resort opened to rave reviews, with architectural and travel publications highlighting my sustainable design elements as innovative industry benchmarks. Edward's new development, now officially named Sonoma Terraces, was moving forward rapidly, with my modified design for Lot 7, including the spacious guest house, approved and ready for construction. The timing seemed fated, just as my parents' financial foundation crumbled. I was positioning myself to purchase a property that could potentially solve their housing crisis. Yet I hesitated to offer this solution directly, unsure how my father's pride would receive such a role reversal. The decision was accelerated by an unexpected phone call from my mother one Sunday afternoon. "Jessica," she began, her voice strained in a way I'd rarely heard. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," I assured her, setting aside the preliminary sketches for another potential project. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath. "Your father didn't want me to call, but I think we need to be honest about our situation. We've depleted our emergency fund, and the house repairs are going to cost more than we can afford. The bank, they're not willing to extend our home equity line any further." I waited, allowing her the space to continue at her own pace. "We're considering bankruptcy," she finally admitted. "The house will probably go into foreclosure unless we can find a solution quickly." The word foreclosure hung heavily between us. Despite everything, I couldn't bear the thought of my parents losing their home of nearly 3 decades in such a humiliating manner. "Have you looked into selling as is?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "We've tried," Mom confirmed. "The foundation issues are scaring away buyers, and the few offers we've received have been insultingly low." I made a quick decision. "I'm coming over tonight. We should discuss this in person, all of us together." There was a pause, then, "All of us?" "You, Dad, Amanda, and me," I clarified. "This affects the whole family. We should approach it together." That evening, we gathered around the dining table where so many family discussions had taken place over the years. Birthdays, holidays, the fateful conversation about my rent. The atmosphere was tense, my father's posture rigid with barely contained distress. "Let me start by saying I appreciate Mom reaching out," I began carefully. "Family should be able to discuss difficult situations openly." Dad shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Amanda gave me an encouraging nod. "I understand you're facing foreclosure if the foundation repairs can't be addressed," I continued. "Given the circumstances, I'd like to propose a solution." I laid out the situation with Sonoma Terraces, the luxury eco-development, my role as lead sustainability architect, and most importantly, my option to purchase Lot 7 at a significant discount due to my involvement with the project. The property includes a main house and a separate guest house, I explained, pulling up renderings on my tablet to show them. The guest house is fully self-contained: 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, kitchen, living area, and a private patio. It's small but high quality, construction with all the amenities you'd need. My parents exchanged puzzled glances. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Dad asked, speaking for the first time since my arrival. I met his gaze directly. "I'm suggesting you sell this house, use whatever equity remains after paying off the mortgage, to supplement your retirement funds, and move into the guest house at Sonoma Terraces." The silence that followed was profound. Amanda looked between us, wide-eyed. Mom's hand covered her mouth. Dad's expression was unreadable. "You want us to live in your guest house?" he finally said, his tone flat. "Yes," I replied simply. "The location is beautiful. Vineyard views, walking trails nearby. The development includes a clubhouse with a pool and fitness center. And you'd have your own private space while still being close enough that we could see each other regularly." "And what would we pay you for this arrangement?" Dad asked, the business side of his mind clearly calculating costs. This was the moment of truth, the complete reversal of our previous dynamic. "Nothing," I said. "You would live there rent-free." Dad's eyebrows shot up. "We can't accept charity, Jessica, not even from our daughter." I had anticipated this response. "It's not charity. Think of it as an advance on inheritance, if that helps. Or consider that I paid nearly $20,000 in rent to live in my childhood bedroom. This balances the ledger, in a way." The reference to my previous rent payments hung in the air, uncomfortable but impossible to ignore. Mom glanced downward, a flush of what might have been shame coloring her cheeks. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't dispute the point. Amanda broke the tension. "I think it's a great solution. The guest house looks beautiful, and Sonoma is only an hour from here. You'd be close enough to maintain your social connections but have a fresh start somewhere new." Mom looked up, hope cautiously entering her expression. "It is a beautiful area. We vacationed near there when you girls were young. Remember? That little bed and breakfast with the garden?" I nodded, grateful for her attempt to find positive associations with the idea. Dad remained silent, clearly struggling with the offer and all it represented. His whole life had been built around being the provider, the patriarch who made the rules and controlled the family finances. Accepting my help required a fundamental shift in how he saw himself and how he saw me. "I need time to think about this," he finally said, rising from the table. "If you'll excuse me." He left the room, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Mom shot me an apologetic look. "He's not rejecting your offer," she assured me quietly. "He just needs to process it. This is a lot for him to accept." I understood more than she realized. The roles we play in our families become part of our identities. Being asked to relinquish those roles, even when they're no longer sustainable, can feel like losing a piece of yourself. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the strange symmetry of our situation. Years ago, I had sat at that same table while my parents informed me that I would be paying premium rent for my childhood bedroom. Now, I was offering them free accommodation in a luxury guest house on my property. Life had indeed come full circle, though not in a way any of us could have predicted. The question remained, would my father's pride allow him to accept this reversal of fortune? And if he did, how would it reshape our family dynamic going forward? 3 days passed without a word from my parents. I continued with my work, finalizing plans for Sonoma Terraces and entertaining inquiries about new projects, but thoughts of their situation lingered in the back of my mind. Had I overstepped? Had my reference to the past rent payments been too pointed, too petty? On the 4th day, Amanda called. "They're discussing your offer," she reported. "Mom's fully on board, but Dad's still wrestling with it." "What's his main concern?" I asked, trying to understand the sticking point. Amanda sighed. "Pride, mostly. He keeps saying he doesn't want to be dependent on his daughter. That it's not the natural order of things. The natural order of things." The phrase struck me as telling, revealing how deeply my father held to traditional family hierarchies, where parents provided for children, not the reverse. "There's also something else," Amanda added hesitantly. "Something I think you should know." "What is it?" "The reason they charged you rent while letting me live free wasn't just favoritism," she explained. "At least, not entirely. Dad made some bad investments the year you moved back home. Risky stocks that tanked completely. They were struggling more than they let on, and your rent payments helped keep them afloat." This revelation landed like a stone in still water, ripples of insight, spreading outward. I had interpreted their actions purely as preferential treatment of Amanda, but financial desperation had played a role too. It didn't excuse the inequality of how they'd treated us, but it added context I'd never considered. Why didn't they just tell me that? I wondered aloud. I would have understood helping with household expenses if everyone was contributing fairly. "You know, Dad," Amanda replied. Admitting financial trouble was admitting failure in his eyes. It was easier to frame it as teaching you responsibility than acknowledging he needed help. After we hung up, I sat with this new information, reassessing the past through this additional lens. My parents' actions still felt unfair. They could have been transparent, could have asked both daughters to contribute proportionally, but understanding their financial strain added a layer of complexity to the narrative I'd constructed. 2 more days passed before my phone rang with Dad's number. I answered immediately. "Jessica," he began, his voice formal. "Your mother and I have discussed your offer at length." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "Before I tell you our decision, I need to say something." He paused, and I could almost picture him straightening his shoulders, preparing for a difficult admission. "I owe you an apology. The way we handled things when you moved back home after graduation, it wasn't right." The acknowledgement, so long in coming, momentarily stunned me into silence. "We should have been upfront about our financial situation," he continued. "And we should have treated you and Amanda equally. I let my pride and my financial anxiety cloud my judgment, and you suffered for it." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, genuinely moved by his unexpected apology. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it." "About your offer," he went on, clearing his throat. "We've decided to accept, with one condition." "What's the condition?" "We want to contribute in some way, perhaps through property maintenance or landscaping. I still have skills to offer, and I can't accept living entirely on someone else's charity, even my daughter's." I considered this request. It seemed reasonable, a way for him to maintain dignity and purpose while accepting the substantial help being offered. "I think that could work," I agreed. "The property will need regular maintenance, and having someone trustworthy handling it would be valuable. We can discuss the details once construction is complete." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank you, Jessica. This isn't how I imagined our retirement would go, but we're grateful for your generosity." After we hung up, a curious mixture of emotions washed over me. satisfaction that my parents had accepted my help, vindication that my father had finally acknowledged the unfairness of the past, and a surprising sense of peace that we might forge a healthier relationship moving forward. Construction on Sonoma Terraces proceeded rapidly over the next 4 months. I visited the site weekly, paying particular attention to Lot 7 and its guest house. I selected finishes I thought my parents would appreciate: warm neutrals, easy-to-maintain surfaces, thoughtful accessibility features they might need as they aged. The guest house, though modest in size, was designed with quality and comfort as priorities. Meanwhile, my parents began the painful process of downsizing, sorting through nearly 30 years of accumulated possessions to determine what would fit in their new, smaller living space. Amanda and I helped on weekends, the 4 of us slowly working through rooms of memories and possessions. "It's strange," Mom commented one Saturday as we sorted through kitchen items. "I thought this process would feel entirely negative, like failure. But there's something freeing about it too. All these things we've been maintaining, cleaning, storing. Did we really need them?" Even Dad seemed to find unexpected liberation in the downsizing process. "When you own less, less owns you," he remarked while deciding which of his tools were essential enough to keep. Their house sold as is to a developer who planned to fix the foundation issues and flip the property. The price was lower than they'd hoped, but sufficient to clear their mortgage and provide a modest cushion for other expenses. 2 weeks before the scheduled move, I took my parents to see their nearly completed guest house for the first time. As we drove through the beautiful countryside surrounding Sonoma Terraces, their apprehension gradually gave way to appreciation of the setting. "It's even more beautiful than the pictures," Mom murmured as we passed vineyards stretching toward the horizon. The development itself was taking shape. Roads completed, landscaping underway, several homes already framed. I drove to Lot 7, where my own home stood nearly finished, the attached guest house tucked discreetly at the rear of the property, connected by a covered walkway but offering privacy for both structures. I led them through the guest house, watching their expressions as they took in the thoughtful design. The open-concept living area with large windows facing the vineyard view, the compact but well-appointed kitchen, the comfortable bedroom with built-in storage, the accessible bathroom with both shower and tub options. "You designed this?" Dad asked, running his hand along the sustainable bamboo countertop. "Every detail," I confirmed. "With you both in mind." Mom's eyes welled with tears as she stood in the center of the living area, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's lovely, Jessica. More than we deserve, honestly." "That's not true," I said gently. "Everyone deserves a safe, comfortable home, especially as they age." Dad was examining the private patio area outside the guest house, already envisioning how he might maintain the surrounding landscaping. "The irrigation system here," he began, shifting into his problem-solving mode. "I could optimize it to reduce water usage even further." I smiled, recognizing this as his way of accepting the new arrangement, by immediately looking for ways to contribute, to add value. As we walked back to the car, Mom linked her arm through mine. "I keep thinking about something your father used to say when you were young, 'Jessica will go far in life.'" She squeezed my arm. "He was right. Just not in the way we expected." The simple acknowledgement warmed me in a way I hadn't anticipated. After all the complications, the hurt feelings, the inequities, there was still this: a parent's recognition of their child's success, a genuine pride untainted by comparison or competition. We were creating something new here, I realized. Not just a living arrangement, but a recalibrated family dynamic based on mutual respect rather than outdated hierarchies. The guest house wasn't just housing, it was the physical manifestation of our family's transformation. Moving day arrived with the crisp clarity of early autumn. The trees lining the drive to Sonoma Terraces had begun their seasonal transformation. hints of gold and amber appearing among the green. It seemed fitting, a visual reminder of the changes taking place in our family. My parents' possessions, now significantly culled, filled a medium-sized moving truck. Amanda and I had taken the day off work to help them transition, wanting to make the process as smooth as possible. The four of us formed an efficient system, Dad and I unloading boxes from the truck, Mom and Amanda unpacking and arranging inside the guest house. By mid-afternoon, the major pieces were in place. The furniture we'd selected for the space, a comfortable sectional for the living area, a round table for the kitchen, a new adjustable bed for easier aging, fit perfectly within the thoughtfully designed rooms. Family photographs found homes on walls and shelves, bringing personal history into the new space. As evening approached, I ordered dinner from a local restaurant, a small celebration of this significant day. We ate on the guest house patio, watching the sunset paint the vineyard hills in shades of rose and lavender. A toast, Amanda proposed, raising her glass. To new beginnings. We clinked glasses, the simple gesture somehow symbolizing our family's recalibration. Dad, who had been quieter than usual throughout the day, cleared his throat. "I want to say something," he began, setting down his wine glass. "When Jessica first proposed this arrangement, my pride made it difficult to accept. The idea of living in my daughter's guest house felt like failure." Mom reached over to touch his hand supportively. "But today, seeing what you've created here," he continued, looking directly at me, "I don't feel like a failure. I feel proud, incredibly proud of the woman you've become, of what you've accomplished through your own talent and determination." His words, so direct and heartfelt, touched something deep within me. Throughout my childhood and early adulthood, I had sought this specific kind of recognition from him. Not just general pride in my achievements, but acknowledgement of my self-made success. "I've been reflecting on the past," he went on. "When we charged you rent while Amanda lived free, I justified it by telling myself you could handle it, that you were capable and responsible. The truth is, we leaned on you because of those qualities, taking advantage of your reliability instead of supporting it." Amanda nodded solemnly. "I benefited from that inequality without questioning it. I'm sorry too, Jess. We can't change the past," Mom added, "but we can try to do better moving forward. All of us." The conversation felt like a weight lifting. Years of unspoken resentment and misunderstanding finally addressed directly. Not erased, but acknowledged, which was its own kind of healing. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot to hear." After dinner, as my parents settled into their first night in the guest house, Amanda helped me unpack a few remaining boxes in my own house. The main residence was larger than I needed as a single woman, but I had designed it with the future in mind. Space for a home office, guest rooms that could eventually become children's bedrooms, a kitchen meant for family gatherings. "This place is incredible, Jess," Amanda remarked as we arranged books on the built-in shelves in the living room. "It's like something from an architectural magazine." "That's the idea," I smiled. "Sonoma Terraces will be featured in several publications once all the homes are complete. It's a showcase for sustainable luxury design." "And your career? Where does it go from here?" I shared my evolving plans, the possibility of starting my own firm specializing in sustainable residential architecture, the other developers who had approached me after seeing the Phoenix Eco Resort, the speaking engagements I'd been invited to at design conferences. "It's hard to believe how much has changed in just a few years," Amanda mused. "You went from being charged rent for your childhood bedroom to all this." She gestured around the beautifully designed space. "Life takes unexpected turns," I agreed. "What about you? How's the merchandising program going?" Her eyes lit up as she described her coursework and internship at a local retailer. "I'm thinking of specializing in sustainable fashion, ethical sourcing, eco-friendly materials. Your success has been inspirational, actually. seeing how you've built your career around environmental principles while still achieving commercial success. The acknowledgement that my journey had positively influenced her path felt like another piece of healing between us. The competitive dynamic our parents had inadvertently fostered was being replaced by mutual support and appreciation. Later that evening, after Amanda left to drive back to her apartment in the city, I stood on my back deck, looking toward the guest house where warm light glowed from the windows. My parents were inside, beginning this new chapter of their lives, a chapter that would be inextricably linked with mine. The emotional landscape between us remained complex. There was forgiveness, yes, but also memory. Understanding, but also awareness that some patterns might never fully disappear. Yet beneath these complexities lay a foundation of family connection that had somehow survived the strain of inequity and resentment. The next morning, I woke early to finish unpacking my home office before my first virtual meeting of the day. As I brewed coffee in my kitchen, I noticed movement outside. Dad, already up and examining the irrigation system he had mentioned during their first visit. I smiled, recognizing this as his way of establishing purpose in this new arrangement. Not as the family patriarch holding financial power, but as a contributor offering valuable skills and support. It was a healthier dynamic for all of us. That afternoon, between meetings, I walked over to the guest house to check on them. I found Mom arranging a small herb garden in containers on the patio, her expression peaceful as she worked with the plants. "This spot gets perfect morning sun," she explained, gesturing to her carefully positioned pots of basil and thyme. "I thought fresh herbs would be nice for cooking." "It's perfect," I agreed. "Actually, I was hoping to ask a favor. I have clients coming to see the main house tomorrow, potential buyers for another lot who want to see my design aesthetic. Would you mind if I showed them the guest house too? It showcases the same principles on a smaller scale." "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "It's your property, Jessica." I shook my head gently. "It's your home. Yes, I own it. But you live here now. That means you have a say over who enters your space." Mom looked surprised, then deeply touched by this distinction. "Thank you for saying that. And yes, you're welcome to show the guest house. I'll make sure it's presentable." This small exchange crystallized the fundamental shift in our relationship. I had financial authority now, but I was choosing to exercise it with respect for their dignity and autonomy, the respect I had once sought from them but rarely received. As weeks passed and we all adapted to our new living arrangement, an unexpected benefit emerged. The physical proximity was helping to heal old emotional distances. Sunday dinners became a regular tradition, sometimes in my house, sometimes in the guest house. Dad found purpose maintaining the property grounds, applying his operations management experience to create efficient systems for landscaping and home maintenance. Mom, freed from the burden of maintaining a too large house, rediscovered her passion for gardening and cooking. And I, the daughter who had once been treated as a tenant, found myself growing into the role of homeowner and provider, with a grace I hadn't known I possessed, offering support without lordship, maintaining boundaries without building walls. 1 year after my parents moved into the guest house, we gathered to celebrate multiple milestones. Sonoma Terraces had been completed to wide acclaim, my sustainable designs featured in architectural publications around the country. I had officially launched my own firm, Winter's Sustainable Design, with a growing team and portfolio of eco-luxury projects, and Amanda had graduated from her merchandising program, securing a position with an ethical fashion retailer. The occasion called for something special, so I arranged a private dinner at the Sonoma Terraces clubhouse, inviting not just my family, but also key figures from my professional journey, Elaine from Meridian, Edward Bennett, and several clients who had become friends. The evening had a surreal quality. Here I was, hosting a sophisticated gathering with industry leaders, while my parents, who once charged me rent for my childhood bedroom, now watched with genuine pride. The reversal was complete, yet it no longer carried the sting of resentment. I might once have anticipated. During a quiet moment, as guests mingled before dinner, Dad approached where I stood looking out over the property. "Quite a view," he remarked, nodding toward the illuminated pathways and thoughtfully designed landscaping. "I remember when this was just dirt and blueprints." I smiled. "Your irrigation adjustment saved us nearly 15% on water usage this summer. The developers are implementing your system across all the common areas now." His eyes lit up with quiet satisfaction. "Just applying principles I learned in manufacturing. Efficiency is efficiency, whether it's an assembly line or a sprinkler system." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, appreciating how our relationship had evolved to this point of mutual respect. His expertise was valued, my accomplishments were recognized. Neither of us needed to diminish the other to feel secure in our own worth. "I've been thinking about your mother's birthday next month," he said eventually. "I'd like to do something special, but on my limited income." "What did you have in mind?" I asked. He described a weekend trip to a coastal town my mother had always loved, where they had honeymooned decades earlier. "There's a bed and breakfast there," she's mentioned several times. "Nothing extravagant, but meaningful." "That sounds perfect," I agreed. "Let me help with the cost." He shook his head, a familiar pride rising. "I've been saving, but—" I interrupted, gently. "Consider it repayment for all those family vacations you funded when we were kids. My treat, no strings attached." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "She'd love that. Thank you." This small exchange encapsulated our new dynamic, honest about financial realities, respectful of pride and dignity, generous without weaponizing that generosity. We had found balance. After dinner, as guests enjoyed dessert and coffee, Edward clinked his glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast to Jessica Winters," he announced, "not just for her brilliant work on Sonoma Terraces, but for showing all of us that sustainable luxury isn't an oxymoron. It's the future of design." Applause rippled through the room. Edward continued, "I'm pleased to announce that Phoenix Developments has contracted Winters Sustainable Design for our next 3 projects, a commitment of over $5 million. Gasps and congratulations filled the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. Amanda beamed with sisterly pride. But it was my father's expression that affected me most deeply. Pure, unalloyed pride, without a hint of the competitiveness or qualification that had often shadowed his praise in the past. Later that night, after the guests had departed, my family lingered in the empty clubhouse. Amanda helped the staff gather the last glasses while Mom straightened the centerpieces out of habit. $5 million, Dad said quietly, shaking, his head in wonder. "That's a long way from that tiny garage apartment near Meridian. A long way from the couch in your living room, too," I replied with a small smile, referencing the rent agreement he'd handed me years ago. He flinched slightly, but met my gaze. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive us for that?" The question held genuine vulnerability, something rare from my father. I considered my answer carefully. "I think forgiveness isn't a single moment," I said finally. "It's a process. There are days when I remember the inequality, the feeling of being valued less than Amanda, and it still hurts. But there are more days now when I see how we've all grown, how we're building something healthier together." Mom joined us, slipping her hand into Dad's. "We were wrong," she said simply. "We justified it by telling ourselves you were stronger, more capable, that you didn't need the support Amanda did. But everyone needs support, especially when they're just starting out." "The irony," Dad added with rueful self-awareness, "is that we're now receiving from you the very support we should have given back then. The difference," I pointed out, "is that I'm offering it equally. If Amanda needed a place to stay, my guest room would be hers without expectation of payment." Amanda appeared at my side, having overheard. "Fortunately for you, I love my apartment. And my independence too much to take you up on that. We laughed, the tension breaking. The four of us walked out together into the cool evening air, the vineyard silvered by moonlight. I never imagined this future, Mom said as we strolled toward our respective homes. When you left for that tiny apartment, Jessica, I worried constantly. We both did. I know, I acknowledged, but I needed to do it my way, on my own terms. And look what you built. Dad gestured toward the elegant homes of Sonoma Terraces, toward my thriving career, toward the life I had created through determination and talent. As we reached the path where they would turn toward the guest house and I would continue to the main residence, Amanda suggested a final nightcap on my patio. Sitting together under the stars, glasses of local wine in hand, a thought struck me with sudden clarity. Do you realize, I said, that this is the first time in our adult lives that our family dynamic isn't centered around inequality? We're all standing on our own foundations now. Dad considered this. Different foundations, certainly. Yours is considerably more substantial than ours at this point. Financially, yes, I agreed. But I meant as people. We're relating to each other as adults with individual strengths and challenges, not as competitors for resources or recognition. Mom raised her glass. To foundations, then. May we continue building stronger ones together. As our glasses clinked, in the moonlight, I felt the final pieces of resentment loosen their hold on my heart. The path to this moment had been complicated, marked by hurt and healing, distance and reconciliation. The daughter who had once been charged rent for her childhood bedroom was now the successful architect providing housing for her parents. The reversal was complete, but it wasn't about vengeance or vindication anymore. It was about coming full circle with greater wisdom, about transforming an unequal past into a more balanced future where all of us could belong authentically, valued, for who we were rather than what we could provide. Life indeed works in strange and unexpected ways, I thought as we sat together under the Sonoma stars. Sometimes it takes losing your place to find your purpose, and sometimes the most meaningful structures we build aren't made of wood and stone, but of forgiveness, understanding, and the courage to create new patterns from the fragments of broken ones. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my home office, illuminating the designs spread across my desk. Winter's sustainable design had grown beyond my wildest expectations, with a team of 15 architects and designers working from our headquarters in San Francisco. The wall behind my desk displayed framed magazine covers featuring our projects. The Phoenix Eco Resort, Sonoma Terraces, and several others that had established us as leaders in sustainable luxury architecture. 3 years had passed since my parents moved into the guest house. 3 years of growth, adjustment, and healing. The arrangement that had once felt like such a dramatic reversal of roles had settled into something natural and mutually beneficial. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Winters, my assistant's voice came through. Your 10 a.m. appointment is here. Thanks, Melissa. I'll be right there. I gathered my portfolio and stepped out to greet my visitors, a young couple looking to build their first home using sustainable principles. As I led them to the conference room, we passed the wall of employee photos where Amanda's picture hung among the others. After completing her merchandising program, she had surprised me by expressing interest in the business side of my firm. Now she managed our client relations and marketing, her natural social skills and growing business acumen proving invaluable to our expansion. My sister will join us shortly, I explained to the clients. She oversees all our client experience processes. After the meeting, Amanda and I had lunch in my office, discussing the couple's project and several others in our pipeline. Did you remind Dad about the sustainability conference next month? She asked, picking up her salad. He seemed uncertain when I mentioned it yesterday. I nodded. He's confirmed. Actually, he's been working on his presentation about the water conservation systems he implemented at Sonoma Terraces. The conference organizers were impressed by the data, a 30% reduction in usage while maintaining lush landscaping. This was perhaps the most unexpected development of the past 3 years. How my father had transformed from reluctant dependent to valued collaborator. His decades of operations management experience, combined with a newfound passion for conservation, had made him an asset to our firm. What began as maintaining the grounds at Sonoma Terraces evolved into consulting on resource efficiency for all our projects. Now, at 70, he was preparing to speak at a major industry conference, sharing his innovations with other sustainability professionals. "And Mom?" Amanda asked. "How's the book coming along?" I smiled. The publisher loved her proposal. Sustainable Home Gardens, Growing Beauty with Less Water will be released next spring. They're especially excited about the photographs from her experimental garden at the Guesthouse. Mom's transformation had been equally remarkable. The small herb garden she started on her patio had expanded into a demonstration project for drought-resistant, ornamental and edible plants. What began as a hobby became a blog, then a consulting business advising homeowners on sustainable landscaping, and now a book contract. At 68, she had discovered a second career that brought her joy and purpose. After lunch, I walked home rather than driving, enjoying the spring weather and the chance to clear my head. As I approached Sonoma Terraces, I passed neighbors, who waved in friendly recognition. The community had flourished, its blend of luxury and sustainability attracting like-minded residents. Before reaching my own house, I stopped at the Guesthouse, finding Mom photographing new blooms in her garden, while Dad adjusted the drip irrigation system he had designed. "Perfect timing," Mom called, setting down her camera. "We were just about to have tea. Join us?" We sat on their patio, drinking tea and discussing the day. The conversation flowed easily, a blend of family updates and professional exchanges. The boundaries between the personal and business aspects of our lives comfortably blurred. The conference organizers called again, Dad mentioned, a hint of pride in his voice. They want to know if I'd be willing to conduct a workshop in addition to the presentation. Apparently, there's significant interest in the irrigation system. "You should do it," I encouraged. "Your methods deserve wider adoption." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm considering it. At my age, I never expected to be starting a new professional chapter." "Speaking of new chapters," Mom interjected, "Amanda mentioned you've been seeing someone. An engineer you met through the Phoenix project?" I felt a flush rise to my cheeks. "Thomas. Yes, we've been dating for a few months. He's brilliant with structural innovations for earthquake resilience." "You should invite him to Sunday dinner," she suggested. "We'd love to meet him." The simple normalcy of this conversation, a mother interested in her daughter's romantic life, a father engaged in work he found meaningful, all while sitting at the guest house I had designed and provided, struck me as remarkable. The journey, from that moment when they handed me a rental agreement for my childhood bedroom, to this point of balanced reciprocity, had been long and sometimes painful, but ultimately healing. Later that evening, as I worked in my home office, I received a text from Amanda. "Reservation confirmed for Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner next month. Private room at Vineyard Table, their favorite view." "Splitting the cost worked," I replied affirmatively, smiling at this small example of how our family dynamic had evolved. Amanda and I now collaborated naturally on family matters, sharing responsibilities, according to our abilities rather than prescribed roles or expectations. My phone rang, Thomas calling after his late meeting. "How was your day?" he asked warmly. "Productive. Busy." "Good," I replied. "Actually, I had an interesting moment of reflection this afternoon." I found myself telling him about the journey our family had taken, from the inequality of my post-graduation days to the balanced relationship we now enjoyed. Thomas listened attentively, having heard pieces of the story before, but never the emotional weight I found myself expressing. It's strange, I concluded. If you had told me 7 years ago, when I was sleeping in that tiny garage apartment, and counting every penny, that one day I'd own a luxury home where my parents lived in my guest house, I wouldn't have believed it. And if you'd said we'd all be happier and healthier for it, I'd have thought you were crazy. Life rarely follows the path we expect, he observed. Sometimes the detours lead to better destinations. After we hung up, I stood at my window looking toward the guest house, its warm lights glowing in the evening darkness. The reversal of our circumstances could have been merely an exercise in poetic justice. The formerly exploited daughter now holding power over those who had treated her unfairly. But we had collectively transformed it into something more meaningful, a recalibration of family bonds based on mutual respect and genuine care. My parents had charged me rent while letting my sister live free, a decision rooted in both favoritism and financial desperation. Now they lived in my guest house rent-free, contributing to our shared success in ways that honored their skills and preserved their dignity. The symmetry wasn't perfect, but perhaps that was the point. We weren't aiming for perfect reciprocal justice, but for a healthier balance that allowed each of us to be valued for who we were, not just what we could provide. As I turned from the window to review one last set of blueprints before bed, a design for an eco-community that would provide affordable, sustainable housing for seniors, I realized that the true architecture of my success wasn't found in buildings at all. It was in the careful, intentional redesign of relationships that had once been structurally unsound, now rebuilt with stronger foundations and room for everyone to thrive. 5 years had passed since my parents moved into the guest house. In that time, Winter's sustainable design had become an industry leader with projects across North America and growing interest from international clients. The Phoenix Eco Resort had won several prestigious awards, and Edward Bennett and I were collaborating on an ambitious new development, affordable eco-housing for middle-income families, combining luxury aesthetics with accessible price points. On a clear Saturday morning, I stood in the central courtyard of this newest project, surrounded by journalists attending the groundbreaking ceremony. The development, called Equilibrium Commons, represented everything I had learned about balancing beauty, sustainability, and accessibility. Architectural harmony that didn't exclude people based on income brackets. Ms. Winters called one reporter. Your firm has primarily focused on luxury developments until now. What prompted this shift toward more accessible housing? I considered the question, thinking about the journey that had led me here. I believe everyone deserves quality, sustainable housing, not just those who can afford premium prices. My own experience with housing insecurity early in my career taught me the importance of stable, dignified living spaces that don't compromise on quality or environmental responsibility. The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. And your parents are both involved in this project as well? I smiled, gesturing toward where Mom and Dad stood near the demonstration garden. Yes, my father's water conservation systems are integral to making these homes both sustainable and affordable to maintain. And my mother has designed the community, garden spaces to be both beautiful and productive, with minimal water requirements. After the press conference, as the crowd dispersed, Thomas joined me. We had been married for just over a year now, our relationship having flourished alongside my firm's growth. As an environmental structural engineer, he brought complementary expertise to my sustainable designs, our professional partnership as harmonious as our personal one. That went well, he said, slipping his arm around my waist. Your parents seemed pleased with the recognition they received. I watched as Dad explained his irrigation system to an interested group of environmental journalists, Mom beside him pointing out specific plants that thrived with minimal water. Both in their early 70s now, they had found unexpected fulfillment in their roles as sustainability consultants. It's funny, I mused. When they first moved into the guest house, I think Dad especially saw it as a kind of retirement, a scaling back of life. Instead, they've both launched what amounts to second careers. Sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a better one, Thomas observed. We made our way through the event, greeting investors and community partners. Amanda moved efficiently among the guests in her role as head of client relations, her natural sociability now channeled into professional networking that benefited our firm immensely. Later that evening, we gathered for dinner at my home. Thomas and I, my parents, Amanda and her fiancé Michael, and Elaine, my former boss who had become both mentor and friend. The mood was celebratory, not just for the successful launch of Equilibrium Commons, but for the harmony we had all found together. "I have news," Amanda announced as we enjoyed dessert on the patio. "Michael and I have decided on a wedding date. Next spring. And," she added with a smile in my direction, "we've found the perfect property for our first home together. It's one of the Sonoma Terraces properties that recently came on the market." "You'll be neighbors," Mom exclaimed, clearly delighted by the prospect. "That's the plan," Michael confirmed. "We love the community here, and the sustainability features align with our values." "Speaking of Sonoma Terraces," Dad interjected, "the Community Association has asked me to lead a workshop series on home water conservation for all residents. Apparently, our guest house has the lowest water usage in the development." The conversation flowed naturally between professional achievements and personal milestones, the boundaries between family and colleagues comfortably blurred. As I looked around the table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for how far we had all come. After our guests departed, I found myself once again at my window, looking toward the guest house where my parents now lived such fulfilling lives. Thomas joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "Penny for your thoughts?" I leaned against him, considering how to articulate the complexity of my feelings. I was thinking about journeys, about how sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful destinations. "Your family's journey, you mean?" I nodded. When my parents handed me that rental agreement years ago, it felt like rejection, like they valued me less than Amanda. I couldn't have imagined then that the inequality would eventually lead us here, to a place where everyone contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. "From each according to their ability, to each according to their needs," Thomas quoted. An ideal that rarely works in large systems but can flourish in families built on mutual respect. Exactly. The difference is we had to learn it the hard way. The rent they charged me, the favoritism shown to Amanda, it could have permanently fractured our family. Instead, it became the catalyst for a complete restructuring of our relationships. Thomas considered this. "Do you think they see the parallels between how they treated you then and how you treat them now?" "I think they do," I said slowly. "But the key difference is that I never use my financial position to diminish them, the way they inadvertently diminished me. Their contributions are valued, their expertise respected. They're not just recipients of my charity, they're active participants in our shared success." The following day, I had a rare quiet moment alone with my father. We sat on his patio, discussing potential refinements to the irrigation system for Equilibrium Commons. "You know," he said during a lull in our technical conversation, "I've been reflecting a lot lately on how things have turned out." "How so?" I asked, curious about his perspective. "When we first moved in here, I saw it mainly in terms of what we'd lost, our independence, our status as providers rather than recipients. I couldn't fully appreciate what we were gaining." He gestured toward his workshop where detailed irrigation plans were spread across a table. "This second chapter has been more fulfilling than I could have imagined." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "Your expertise has been invaluable to the firm." He nodded, then added with unexpected vulnerability, "I hope you know that I see the contrast between how we handled your return home after graduation and how you've handled our need for housing. You've been more generous than we deserved." It's not about deserving, I replied gently. It's about recognizing that family support shouldn't come with inequality attached. He reached over and patted my hand, a small gesture containing volumes of unspoken acknowledgement. We sat in comfortable silence, the vineyard stretching before us, both reflecting on the winding path that had led us to this moment of mutual understanding. As I prepared to leave, gathering my notes on the irrigation system, Dad walked me to my car. Your mother and I were talking last night, he said, about legacy, about what we'll leave behind when we're gone. I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. We realized that our most meaningful legacy isn't the house we lost or the possessions we've accumulated. It's the lessons our family learned together, sometimes painfully, about true reciprocity and respect. He smiled slightly. And, of course, your firm and the sustainable communities you're building. Our firm, I corrected gently. Winters is a family name after all. As I drove home, I thought about legacy, about how the patterns we inherit can be transformed rather than merely repeated or rejected. The inequality I experienced had motivated me not toward vengeance but toward creating more balanced systems, both within our family and in the communities I designed. That, perhaps, was the most powerful reversal of all. 10 years had passed since my parents first moved into the guest house at Sonoma Terraces. A decade that had transformed not just our living arrangements, but the very foundation of our family dynamics. What began as a role reversal, the daughter who was once charged rent now becoming her parents' landlord, had evolved into something far more profound. A complete reimagining of how family members could support each other across generations. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood at the edge of my property, watching the sunrise illuminate the vineyard hills in shades of amber and gold. Today was significant. The 10th anniversary of Winter's Sustainable Design, now recognized as one of the leading architectural firms in the sustainable building movement. We would be hosting a celebration at our home, gathering clients, colleagues, and family to mark the milestone. But as I sipped my coffee in the early quiet, I found myself reflecting not on professional achievements, but on the parallel journey our family had undertaken. From fractured relationships built on inequality to something sturdy, balanced, and nurturing for all its members. Movement caught my eye. My father, now 79 but still remarkably spry, making his morning inspection of the irrigation system he had designed and continually refined over the years. What had begun as a way for him to maintain dignity while accepting my help had blossomed into genuine expertise that now benefited all our architectural projects. His water conservation methods had been implemented in communities across 3 states, earning recognition from environmental organizations and saving millions of gallons annually. "You're up early," he called, noticing me watching from the terrace. "Big day," I replied, raising my mug in greeting. "Thought I'd enjoy the quiet before the chaos begins." He nodded understanding and made his way toward me, clipboard in hand. "Just finished checking the readouts. We're 22% below average water usage for properties this size, even with your mother's expanded garden." Mom's garden. What had started as a few herb containers on the guest house patio had grown into a showcase of drought-resistant plantings that regularly attracted visitors from across the country. At 77, she had published 3 books on sustainable gardening, become a sought-after speaker at environmental conferences, and mentored countless home gardeners in water-wise techniques. "Speaking of which," Dad continued, "your mother mentioned the film crew will want footage of the garden. She's been up since dawn, making sure everything looks perfect." I smiled, imagining Mom fussing over her beloved plants. The documentary had been Amanda's idea, a record of our firm's evolution featuring interviews with clients, team members, and family. "It's not just a business story," she had insisted. "It's about how sustainable architecture and sustainable relationships share the same principles." Amanda, once the carefree sister who lived rent-free while I struggled, had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all. Now a full partner in Winter's sustainable design, overseeing client relations and community development, she had evolved from entitled youth to thoughtful business leader. Her journey mirrored our family's larger evolution, from unexamined privilege to conscious reciprocity. As if conjured by my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Running final checks with the videographer. Everything on schedule. How are you feeling about today? Reflective, I typed back. See you soon. Heading inside, I found Thomas in our kitchen, coordinating with caterers while simultaneously reviewing last-minute changes to his presentation. My husband of 8 years had been my partner in both life and work, his expertise in environmental structural engineering complementing my sustainable design focus. Together, we had expanded Winter's sustainable design beyond individual buildings, to entire communities, each one advancing our vision of spaces that nurtured both planetary and human well-being. The twins are up and dressed, he reported, kissing my cheek as I entered. Elaine is practicing her welcome speech and Edward is rearranging the display models according to his own mysterious organizational system. I laughed, picturing our 7-year-olds, named for the 2 mentors who had changed the trajectory of my career, earnestly preparing for their roles in today's celebration. As long as they're ready when guests arrive. They take after their mother, Thomas observed with a smile. Perfectionists with a vision. As the morning progressed and preparations accelerated, I retreated briefly to my office, seeking a moment of quiet before the day's events. The walls displayed the tangible evidence of professional success, awards, project photographs, magazine features. But my attention was drawn to the family photos interspersed among them. Thomas and me on our wedding day, the twins as infants, Amanda and her husband Michael with their young son, my parents standing proudly in the garden they had created. A soft knock interrupted my reverie. Dad stood in the doorway, more formally dressed than usual in a blazer and tie, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. "There's something I'd like to discuss before everyone arrives." "Of course," I gestured to the chairs by the window. "Everything okay?" He sat carefully, the slight stiffness in his movements betraying his age despite his otherwise vital appearance. "More than okay. That's actually what I wanted to talk about." From the portfolio, he withdrew a small leather-bound notebook, one I'd seen him writing in periodically over the years. "I've been keeping this since we moved into the guest house," he explained, running his hand over the worn cover. "A record of thoughts, observations, a way to process the changes in our lives." He opened it, turning to a page marked with a ribbon. 10 years ago today we moved in. I made an entry that evening after you and Amanda helped us unpack." He adjusted his reading glasses and read aloud. "Living in my daughter's guest house feels like the ultimate admission of failure. After a lifetime of providing for my family, I've become dependent on my child. The reversal seems cruel, a punishment, for choices I'm not sure I fully understand." The rawness of his words, the pain evident even a decade later, caught in my throat. "Dad," he held up a hand, "please let me finish." He turned several pages forward. 6 months later, I wrote this. "Jessica has invited me to consult on the irrigation systems for her new project. Not charity work, but genuine consultation. Based on my operations experience, for the first time since the move, I feel I might have something valuable to offer." Another page turn. 1-year mark. The water conservation workshop was oversubscribed. People actually want to hear what I have to say about sustainable systems. Caroline's garden is becoming a local attraction. We're building something here that we never imagined possible. He continued through selected entries that tracked their journey, from reluctant dependents to valued contributors, from recipients of charity to partners in a shared vision. The progression was remarkable. hurt and resentment gradually giving way to purpose, then pride, then profound fulfillment. He paused at an entry from the 5-year mark. Today, I overheard Jessica explaining my irrigation system to a client. Not as her father's hobby, but as an integral, innovative component of the firm's approach to sustainability. I realized that I've become more than just her dependent father. I've become a colleague of sorts. The distinction matters more than I can express. Finally, he turned to the most recent entry, dated just yesterday. 10 years in the Guesthouse. That became a home. 10 years of second chances and unexpected purpose. I understand now what Jessica tried to tell me that first day, that true family support isn't about hierarchy or control, but about creating space for each person to contribute what they can and receive what they need. The reversal that once seemed like punishment has become the greatest blessing of my later years. He closed the notebook and looked up at me, eyes bright with emotion. I've had this bound into a proper book. I'd like to present it at the celebration. Today, a record of transformation that parallels the growth of your firm. Moved beyond words, I reached for his hand. Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied gently. Just know that your mother, and I have come to understand, perhaps better late than never, the inequality we once perpetuated, and we're profoundly grateful for the more balanced model you've created, not just in our family, but in your approach to architecture and community building. He hesitated, then added with newfound vulnerability. When we charged you rent while letting Amanda live free, we told ourselves it was about teaching you responsibility. But looking back, I can see it was really about power, maintaining our authority in a way that felt comfortable and familiar. We never considered how it undermined your sense of belonging, your feeling of being equally valued. This direct acknowledgement of the core injury, the inequality that had driven me from their home and ultimately led to my independent success, felt like the closing of a long open wound. Not erasing the past, but finally seeing it clearly together. Before I could respond, we heard the sounds of the first guests arriving. Dad stood, tucking the notebook back into his portfolio. We should join the others, but I wanted you to know, privately first, how deeply we appreciate the path you've created for all of us. The celebration unfolded beautifully throughout the day. Over 100 guests filled our home and grounds, clients, colleagues, friends, and family. Edward Bennett, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, had flown in specifically for the occasion. Elaine, my former boss and mentor from Meridian, chatted animatedly with younger architects from our firm. The twins flitted between guest groups, proudly showing off the sustainable features of our home with the enthusiasm only 7-year-olds could muster. A display near the entrance showcased models of our most significant projects, from the Phoenix eco-resort that launched my independent career to our latest initiative, a network of sustainable communities designed specifically for multi-generational living. Beside each model were photographs of the completed buildings and testimonials from residents about how the spaces had transformed their daily experiences. After lunch was served on the terrace overlooking the vineyards, Amanda called for everyone's attention, stepping onto a small platform we had arranged for presentations. As many of you know, she began, Winter's sustainable design began with a single project and a radical vision. That luxury and sustainability could coexist. That beauty and responsibility weren't mutually exclusive. She gestured toward me. My sister Jessica saw possibilities where others saw compromises. But what many don't know is that the philosophy behind our firm, the commitment to balance, equity, and mutual support, grew from our family's own complicated journey. Dad stepped forward then, the bound version of his notebook in hand. Which is why I'd like to present this first edition of Reversal of Fortune, Finding Purpose in Life's Unexpected Turns. It chronicles our family's transformation, alongside the growth of winter's sustainable design. Murmurs of interest rippled through the crowd as he continued. 10 years ago, my wife Caroline and I moved into the guest house on this property. Not by choice, but by necessity. After a lifetime of seeing ourselves as providers, we found ourselves in need. The daughter we had once charged rent to live in, her childhood bedroom, while her sister lived free, was now offering us housing at no cost. A hush fell over the gathering as the personal nature of his revelation registered. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. He acknowledged with a rueful smile. What could have been a story of poetic justice or bitter resentment instead became a lesson in true reciprocity. Jessica offered us not just housing, but dignity, the opportunity to contribute meaningfully through our own skills and interests. Mom joined him, taking his hand as he continued. Over the years, as Caroline's garden expertise and my water conservation systems became integrated into winter sustainable design projects, we discovered a new model of family support, one where each person's contributions are valued regardless of age or traditional roles, where interdependence is recognized as strength rather than weakness. He turned toward me, his expression solemn yet peaceful. I once believed that family hierarchy was fixed, parents providing for children until the children left to establish their own households. When circumstances forced a reversal of that pattern, it felt like failure. What I've learned through Jessica's approach is that true family resilience comes not from rigid roles, but from flexible support that adapts to changing needs and recognizes evolving capabilities. Mom stepped forward then, adding her perspective. The garden that began as my small attempt to create beauty in our new circumstances has become a laboratory for drought-resistant techniques, now implemented in communities across 3 states. My books have reached gardeners I'll never meet. At 77, I'm more professionally fulfilled than I was at 47, all because our daughter created space for reinvention rather than retirement. As they spoke, I watched the audience, colleagues nodding in recognition of how these principles had informed our architectural approach, friends seeing our personal history in a new light, clients understanding more deeply the philosophy behind our designs. Dad concluded by presenting me with the bound journal. Today we celebrate not just a successful business, but a successful reimagining of family relationships, one where contribution is valued but never demanded, where support is offered without conditions, where each person's needs and abilities are recognized without hierarchy. The applause that followed felt like a public witnessing of private healing, an acknowledgement that what we had built together transcended both business success and family reconciliation. It was a new model entirely, one with implications beyond our particular story. The formal presentations continued with Thomas sharing innovations from our latest projects, Amanda outlining our community impact initiatives, and several clients offering testimonials about how our spaces had transformed their daily lives. Throughout it all, I found myself watching my family interact with our guests. The easy confidence with which my parents discussed their contributions to our work, the natural partnership between Amanda and me that had replaced the old dynamic of favored and unfavored daughters, the twins absorbing it all as their normal understanding of how family functions. Later, as afternoon mellowed into evening and guests began to depart, I found a quiet moment with Edward Bennett, the client whose eco-resort project had launched my independent career a decade earlier. When you first showed me your sustainable design concepts, he reminisced, sipping his sparkling water, I knew you had exceptional talent. But watching how you've expanded those principles beyond architecture into family systems and community structures, that's the real innovation. I hadn't thought of it quite that way, I admitted. He nodded toward where my father was explaining his irrigation monitoring system to a group of environmental engineers. Your parents could have been relegated to passive recipients of your charity. Instead, they've become vital contributors to your larger vision. That transformation reflects the same principles you apply to your buildings, recognizing inherent value, leveraging natural strengths, creating systems where all elements support each other. His observation crystallized something I had felt, but never articulated, that the redesign of our family relationships and the philosophy behind our sustainable architecture shared the same fundamental principles. Both rejected hierarchical models in favor of symbiotic ones. Both recognized that true sustainability came from balanced reciprocity rather than dominance. As twilight descended, our celebration shifted to a more intimate gathering. Close family and a few dear friends remained, gathered around the fire pit on our main terrace. The twins had finally exhausted their energy and were dozing against their grandparents on the outdoor sofa. Amanda's son James, now 5, was carefully examining the model of our newest project with his father, Michael. "I have an announcement," I said as we settled with our drinks. "One that seems fitting on this anniversary." All eyes turned to me expectantly. Winter's Sustainable Design has secured funding for a new type of community, one specifically designed around concepts of multi-generational support and environmental stewardship. We're calling it Full Circle, and it will feature homes of varying sizes clustered around shared green spaces, with common areas designed to foster both independence and interconnection. "That sounds wonderful," Mom said. "Where will it be located?" I smiled. "About 20 minutes from here. And the reason I'm telling you all privately first is that I'd like us to consider it as our family's next chapter." Seeing their questioning looks, I continued. "The guest house has served its purpose beautifully, but as you both age, it might make sense to be in a community specifically designed with accessibility and multi-generational living in mind. Thomas and I would have a home there too, as would Amanda and Michael if they're interested. Neighbors rather than landlord and tenants," Dad mused, immediately grasping the significance. "Exactly. Equal residence in a community built around the principles we've discovered together: mutual support without hierarchy, contribution without obligation, independence alongside connection." The idea sparked animated conversation, questions about timeline, design features, what it might mean for each of our lives. As we talked, I observed the easy flow of ideas between generations, the natural give and take that had replaced the strained dynamics of the past. "It's perfect symbolically," Amanda noted. "Full circle, from the inequality of our young adult years to a community explicitly designed for balanced reciprocity. I like that my irrigation systems and your mother's gardening principles are integrated into the core design," Dad added, clearly imagining the possibilities. Not add-ons or afterthoughts, but fundamental to how the community functions. As night deepened around us and stars appeared above the vineyard hills, I found myself filled with quiet wonder at the journey we had taken. The daughter who had once been charged rent for her childhood bedroom while her sister lived free had indeed become her parents' landlord. But more importantly, she had become the architect of a different family system, one built on principles of balance, reciprocity, and mutual respect. Later that night, after everyone had departed and the house was quiet, Thomas and I stood at our bedroom window looking toward the guest house, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "About journeys," I replied. "About how the hardest ones often lead to the most meaningful destinations. Your family's journey certainly qualifies." I nodded. When my parents handed me that rental agreement years ago, it felt like rejection. Like they valued me less than Amanda. I couldn't have imagined then that the inequality would eventually lead us here, to a place where everyone contributes, according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. "From each according to their ability, to each according to their needs," Thomas quoted. An ideal that rarely works in large systems, but can flourish in families built on mutual respect. Exactly. We had to learn it the hard way, but we did. Learn it. I turned in his arms to face him. And now we're building communities based on those same principles, Full Circle and others like it. "Your most meaningful design project wasn't a building at all," he observed. It was the restructuring of your family relationships. As I fell asleep that night, I reflected on this truth. The daughter who had once been charged rent while her sister lived free had, through a twist of fate and deliberate choice, created a different model of family support, one that would shape not just our lives, but potentially those of the communities we designed and built. The patterns that had caused such pain in my own youth would not be repeated, not because they had been forgotten, but because they had been consciously transformed into something stronger, more flexible, and ultimately more sustaining for everyone involved. Full circle indeed, not in returning to where we began, but in creating something entirely new from the lessons of the past. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.